Hello everybody, welcome to another video. Today it is the 19th of September. Let's get into this. So, over here on the Andriivka bridge chat, I do have some updates to go over. So, the 24th Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces has been continuing their assaults on some of these towns over here using their recon groups. And for the most part, they've not been able to make any major breakthroughs yet because of Russian artillery. And a lot of their assaults were further complicated by the flooding that occurred a few days ago. So what the Ukrainians did was they sent in the 808th Support Regiment, and they're just sappers from the Odessa region, and they set up 5 pontoon bridges, or at least they attempted to. Basically, that was in this part of the front line around Andriivka and Lozove, not necessarily in Bilohorivka or further south, but they were not able to fully complete their work due to a lot of the shelling and the heavy fire inflicted by the Russian forces. But this does not mean that Ukraine is totally cut off. They are still getting supplies from this region, just for a bit further south, in this town of Ohred, Geneve, and Mala Sidinucha. So you have either it's a pontoon bridge here or some sort of like raft that's transporting goods, sort of like ammo, anti-tank, missiles. They're being moved around over here, and they're being supplied to the 18th and 35th regiments of the Ukrainians. Further north, there's also some supplies being transferred to the front lines around Bilohorivka, where you have the 46th Air Assault Brigade there being resupplied right now. And their goal basically is to just push into Davydiv Breed later on once they are able to fully resupply themselves and reach an advantageous position. Let's move on now to the northern part of the Kherson front line, where the Ukrainians continue their recon operations. They haven't really started any sort of offensive operations here yet. They're mainly probing into this town, Arkhangelsk, and then to this town, Mirolubivka, and also to this other town, Lyubimivka. So that's usually where you see the fighting on this part of the front, and it's usually done by the 128th Mountain Assault Brigade, which has moved into this area. They were transferred to the Kryvyi area for some resupplying and training again, and now they've been moved back into the front line to fight over here. In addition, you have the 66th Separate Infantry Brigade, which is a part of the Reserve Corps in Ukraine. They've been moved into this part of the front line to further stabilize the line and then potentially advance later on. Let's move on to the Donetsk Front now. Over here, we don't have much to talk about. It's mainly just artillery duels going on around here. But recently, you've heard about Ukrainian attempts at counterattacks in Marinka and also at Pesky. Usually, it's conducted by the 56th Infantry Brigade and also by the 115th Brigade. The 115th Brigade, apparently, according to the Russian sources, suffered some pretty heavy losses and might actually be absorbed into the 56th Brigade. But we're not seeing a slowdown of these Ukrainian counterattacks. It seems as if they're trying to prolong the fighting in this area until they could get resupplies and more shipments of artillery, because they are supposed to be getting now some like 155 millimeter artillery systems. Not as good as the M777s or the Caesars, but they're also going to get some of those now, which might be able to keep the front line static for a while. So that's probably their goal at the moment in this area. Further north, we do have some updates from the Bakhmut Front. Ukraine actually reported on an assault on Kurdyumivka, and usually they just say that they repel all the assaults. So the fact that they're even mentioning Kurdyumivka does imply that the fighting has reached this area. So I will have to change the map. Also, It seems as if the fighting has also reached Odradivka, where fighting was reported. Also, this basically just confirms by now that Mykolaievka, Druha, Mykolaievka itself were both taken. There was some confusion because I heard talk about Zaitsev being captured, but I don't think the right Zaitsev is being mentioned because this is the northern one. There are two Zaitsevs in this region. This Zaitsev is still under Ukrainian control. I think the Zaitsev that's being mentioned is actually this one, the one further to the south, because I heard a lot of pro-Russian sources. They were talking about how the final suburb of Zaitsev was taken today. It was called Zovanka. So they're saying that they originally took over one quarter of it, but then they like fought over the next two, and now they finally took the last one. I'm not sure if that's true, but it does make more sense than the other Zaitsev falling. Until we get confirmation, I'm just gonna keep it as contested. But if it actually did fall, then it means that all of this area to the east of this road to Bakhmut is now under Russian control for all intents and purposes, and it means that they can pretty easily reach Ozaryanivka and then potentially work their way up and then actually conduct a two-pronged attack on Kordiumivka. Let's move on to some other news in this area. We have reports from the Wagner group that they've actually launched an offensive in the direction of Spirny, but I'm not sure if this is true because it's unconfirmed. Spirny by now is probably totally decimated. There's not much left of it, but it seems as if there's a bit of a bulge in the Ukrainian line, and if Wagner is successful, they can sort of stabilize the line along here after they had previously lost Spirny to the Ukrainians. Also, I will have to change Bilohorivka to fully under Ukrainian control, given the fact that now even Russian sources are admitting to this. So, Ukraine basically has control of all this region right now. And I think what they're going for is not actually an assault on Lysychansk. That would not be a good idea because this area is pretty fortified and actually penetrating such a huge city would be very difficult. I think what they're actually going for is establishing some sort of like pontoon bridges over here around the Bilohorivka area and actually crossing into the forest over here. From there, they can then advance through the forests unimpeded until they reach this Dibrova and also Crimea, which was fought over extensively a few months ago. Both these towns were fought over extensively, and they might just be recaptured pretty easily if Russia doesn't notice the developments going on around here. So I think that's what they're going for. Look out for what occurs on this front. Now let's move on to the Kharkiv area, where I did see actually something pretty interesting. There was some satellite imagery of a pontoon bridge set up around here in Bahordichny, which does confirm my suspicions that the initial Ukrainian advance north of the Donetsk River was not from over here right next to Oskil and Yaromivka, Pasika. It was actually further south near Studenak and not Studenak, near Tetianivka and Bohorodichny. And then from there, they just entered Sviatohirsk without much of a resistance. Now there's talk that Yarova has actually fallen. This is potentially true because we did see an image of Ukrainian flag geolocated to this area. It was on a communications tower right over here, and here's a photo if you're interested. So it is probably under their control. So I'll change that to blue for now. So we're gonna have to see now if Ukraine decides to go for Alexandrivka and go north, or if they continue advancing to the east and attack Novoselivka, Darilove, Dorobisheve. Then finally towards Liman. That's something that could happen. Now let's move on to the Kupiansk area where there was some discussion about whether the eastern part was under Ukrainian control. I know some people in the comments were saying that It was based on a video, which is over here. I had this on the map for a few days now. You can see the video. I mean, it is possible that the Ukrainians do have a presence here. The reason why I'm skeptical of this is because it seems like the one video was just a few troops in a rather isolated area, meaning there was like no Russian troops around. There wasn't any fighting in the area. It seems as if it was just like a recon group that was like furtively entering the city. But I'm not sure. It seems as if they were able to cross the river and enter this area, it was probably lightly defended in the first place. But this doesn't mean they have a very solid control of this entire region, so it is probably just a gray zone right now. War Gonzo, which is a pro-Russia reporting channel, and they're actually go on the ground. They actually released a video, and they stated in the video that the eastern part of Kupiansk was solidly under Russian control. But the thing is, their video was not from Kupiansk itself; it was from Kislivka, and it says it on the sign. I'm not exactly sure where the location of the sign is, but I would assume it's on the approaches of the town, so I put it over here. And you could see in the background, it says the sign. So they're not actually in it. If they were in the town itself, then I could like safely say that it was under Russian control, but I'm not actually sure right now. I can understand why they're not going to go there though, because it's so close to the front lines. It's extremely dangerous. But who knows? Now, last thing is Russia has been sending in some reinforcements, mainly volunteer units, not actual like conscripts, specifically to the Seversk area. You had a unit from Severomarsk, which is a city near Murmansk, of the Nenets tribe. I'm pretty sure they're like one of those indigenous like Siberian groups. So they have a volunteer formation. I think it was a company, so like about 150 men, something like that, being sent over to the Seversk front. And then you also had about 100 men pictured in a photo training in the Russian Caucasian region, and they're from South Ossetia. And that's the third volunteer unit from South Ossetia that's being sent now to the front line. Last thing that I will say is I did see a comment talking about how there was like heavy snow in Ukraine starting in the western region, and that's true. I did see some pretty interesting videos and photos of things starting to freeze, a lot of snow specifically in this mountainous region over here near Uzhhorod, basically in the Transcarpathian mountain area and in the Oblast Zakarpattia. So this is it's only September now, so you can expect over the next few months this sort of thing to permeate into the rest of Ukraine. So that's interesting. But I have nothing else to say. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you later.